This is a game about corrupt religion, corrupt governments, political upheaval, and the horrors of war, all set within the parameters of a JRPG made in the Super Nintendo era. Welcome to Chained Echoes, an RPG made by a single man, Matthias Linda, being heavily inspired by the classics of old from the PS1 and SNES era. Originally kickstarted in 2019 by the German developer Matthias. Matthias started work on Chained Echoes in 2016, and over the course of 7 years, developed Chained Echoes by himself, only getting outside help with the music and I'm assuming the artwork. That changed through development, especially after the Kickstarter. Working with Deck 13, known for games like Lords of the Fallen and The Surge, but in this case, they only published Chained Echoes. This opened up opportunities to work with people like Eddie Maruno Croft, the man who created the music, and allowing Matthias to do something that most Kickstarter and indie developers never do: finish their game. At first coming across as your standard RPG, but as you get into it, you start to see the real depths to it, like a classic Western RPG. Think Dragon Age Origins, where you'll be able to manipulate combinations and weaknesses to win, like covering someone in oil and then hitting them with fire. With 8 members in combat, 4 members of your party on the battlefield at one time, using the Tekken Tag Team system to utilize the strength of all 8 members in battle, all depending on how the fight is going. You can switch somebody in or out after something as simple as getting injured, or after taking debilitating debuffs, like poison or paralysis. So kind of like a Pokemon game, except you don't lose your Pokemon's turn, so you can always play up to your team's strengths and weaknesses. You can start out with the fastest members, switching in your buffers and debuffers to power yourself up and weaken the enemy as fast as possible, then switching them out to their damage dealing secondaries. And the same idea could be attributed to tanks, being sent out there to soak up all the damage.
Great debut for Kalilov, teeing off!
To then bring out your healers or your heavy damage dealers to take their place. The tag system isn't just about replacing injured characters or dealing with enemy weaknesses. It's also about fully utilizing your team's synergy and allowing you to set some powerful strategies. Utilizing the class emblems, you can even make someone that's your main tank use healing abilities, because class emblems give that character a subclass, adding better stats and giving them powerful active and passive skills. I always like to make a character like Sienna even faster, while doing way more damage with the bandit class emblem. And that's a small amount of what you can do with this system. But how do you balance all of this? Well, through the use of the overdrive bar, a system that uses the bar on the top left. Yellow means everything's normal, green means you have the advantage, and red, well, you don't want to be there. Every action during the course of battle affects this in some way. Any action will increase the gauge other than defending. Skills increase it the most, while attacks do increase the bar, but just by a little less. Now, to put it simply, until you've reached a green gauge, you can't lower it without specific skills or ultras. Once in the green, some of your skills will change color, indicating that they will lower the gauge with use. Meaning that you'll have to choose between skills that will increase or lower the gauge to stay in the green. But those skills might not be optimal for the fight, so fight smart and don't forget to tag someone in. And all of these systems change drastically when using sky armors, starting with the gauge changing. No green meter anymore, just advantage and disadvantage zones. Each sky armor manipulates the gauge through attacks and skills like before, but with gear shifting. Gears 0, 1, and 2 all have different properties and uses. 0 is storing fuel each turn, but you can't use skills till you shift into Gear 1. Gear 1 moves the gauge forward, uses less fuel, and does mid damage. Gear 2 moves the gauge back, using more fuel and doing a fuck ton of damage. All the giant robots, or sky armors, are mostly customizable. You have the base robot, you can equip to any of the pilots, each with their own stats. You can change their color, loadouts, each weapon, and sub-weapon, each having their own unlockable skills and stats to learn. So changing your kit is key. You can do some nasty stuff in combat and very easily if you know what you're doing. All of this is used for intricate and complex boss battles. The combat in the boss battles are very Chrono Trigger and early Final Fantasy, with creative battles involving the landscape and different skills. From minecart battles with bosses where you control where you're going to go while battling, to literally changing mechanics like the overdrive bar, to fight fate-changing boss battles. Even the joke battles mess with your expectations. But I do have problems with the combat, mostly the leveling system and the skill leveling systems. This is a very personal bias. I hate games that level the world around you like Oblivion in Final Fantasy VIII, because you never really get stronger. While Chained Echoes doesn't have that, the system in place works in a very similar way, limiting how strong you can get. You only level up by defeating bosses and by completing quests on the reward board, so no one can outlevel the game. You get Grimoire shards or ability points to upgrade stats and acquire skills. But broken controller, that says you gained experience. What's that for then? Well, you do get experience for fighting enemies, but it all goes into leveling your skills, passive and active. This goes for humans and robots. The best and worst thing about the system is eventually you really don't need to fight and can just skip battles entirely, because you don't have anything to gain from battles once your build is maxed out. You play as Glenn, the ace sky armor pilot for a mercenary group known as the Band of the Iron Bull, on a suicide mission that's so bad, most people are expecting the money they're earning from this mission to go back to their families instead of actually getting to enjoy the spoils of their conquest. Our goal is to destroy the Opus Stone, or the Grand Grimoire. It is an all-out assault that doesn't go well. Glenn's shot out of the sky, and even the mercenary ship is knocked out of the sky. But everyone teams up to get to the Grand Grimoire. To reach the stone, you have to defeat an elite pilot in his sky armor as just normal dudes. But if you make the right decisions early, you might get a helping hand. That's right, your decisions actually matter, especially early on. Everything in the first couple of hours is like the trial from Chrono Trigger. From helping a soldier by telling him to run away, to the guy that really loves explosives, helping a boss fight, it all matters for the smaller stories. Chained Echoes takes place in the continent of Valandis, a continent devoured by war for the last 6 generations, between the 3 kingdoms battling for dominion: Taryin, Escania, and Gravos. But after 156 years of war, a peace treaty is signed after the incident happens. One year later, we play as Lynn and Rob, 2 members of the City Watch. They're actually the Taryin Prince and her royal subject, traveling the country in secret. Lynn and Rob, as members of the City Watch, are obligated to stop a terrorist attack on the festival for a country that hates them, even getting their hands very dirty to stop it. Walking past them is the Ard Victor of Arcadia, the author of stage plays and poems, a well-known celebrity with a near-eternal life, participating in the festivals of festivals, kind of like another game, Chrono Trigger. That's before his run-in with Sienna, part thief, part con artist. Known in these parts as the Red Succubus, Sienna has a run-in with some other thieves and is forced to steal the Blue Dawn from the royal treasury. On her way there, she runs into Glenn and Kaylin, our Sky Armor pilots from earlier, saving Sienna from a giant octopus, teaming up to enter the palace where Lynn, Rob, and Victor already are. Victor hangs out with royalty while Len and Rob look for the traitors. Glenn and Kaylin search the place for the Grand Grimoire, or at the very least, information on it. The prologue of Chained Echoes is a lot like Wild Arms. It's all about setting up the characters, motivations, in some very fun, interactable settings. Before the shit hits the fan, like any JRPG of any era, the castle is attacked by a powerful monster, uniting our ragtag team for their many adventures. From here on out are going to be spoilers for my favorite stories and side stories from Chained Echoes. So if you've already decided to play this game, at the very least put this on your watch later list. Trust me, no hard feelings. Just have fun with the game. But now, I'm going to talk about my favorite thing in the game, the side stories. The team runs across an inn with a young girl and what seems to be her father running it. Learning about these weird white flowers that sound like they're screaming when they're stepped on. That night, Lynn goes missing. The party assumes she ditched them so they'd be safe, but no one has seen a woman who fits her description. Now turning back to the inn to ask more questions, they find a prison under the inn, with multiple diaries, and Lynn inside. The owner was experimenting on transferring souls from humans to flowers. He's trying to make the ultimate magical being, and he's gotten pretty close. But not all of our stories are Berserk levels of fucked up. They're made in Abyss fucked up. Like Tomoki and Makai. Makai's parents are adventurers traveling the world for new recipes and ingredients. Tomoki was a friend of theirs who was very old and very forgetful, to say the least. When searching the Great Cretan, Mika's parents were eaten by the megalo-worm. While traveling the land, our party runs into this megalo-worm, triggering Tomoki's PTSD. This all leads to the Chained Echoes crew taking down this worm, entering it like they're the Gears of War team, leading to the finding of an entire village living inside the giant worm, living off the stomach meat inside the worm. Among those villagers are her parents. Speaking of all the anime that this game was inspired by, how about Fullmetal Alchemist? Not that story! Actually, that might be here too. But Thraz, the quadruple amputee shaman wizard, might have my favorite of the backstories. But Thraz is a mercenary that works for an ancient organization that is meant to protect the world. But one day the village he and his son are staying at is attacked. His son is killed in front of him. But that's not it for his son. You see, there's ancient deities out there willing to give you a second chance if you're strong-willed enough. His son is given that opportunity, becoming a giant suit of living armor. But while trying to protect his father, he is killed again. But this time, his father, Thraz, is given that opportunity. He is cursed with the ability to manipulate metal. But like in games like Dragon Guard, the curse has to take something away, and it takes away his limbs. After he gets his revenge, he uses his own son's body to replace his arms and legs. And that's why he refers to himself as they, because he is Thraz and his son in one body. If you can't tell, this is a somehow even more violent retelling of the Elric brothers' origin. Because Chained Echoes is very much inspired by a lot of Japanese media in games and anime. Yeah, that's right, there is even more anime references. Matthias Linda, in most of his interviews, has gone on to state that his favorite games are his biggest references, like Chrono Trigger and Xenogears. Xenogears with its storytelling, political and theological discussion, and how this affects normal people. forced to survive through its trying times. And of course, the giant robots. Also being inspired by the SNES classic Chrono Trigger with its iconic soundtrack, amazing artwork, and most specifically, the gameplay design. Combat map design specifically from how each encounter is laid out on the map, only being triggered if you walk into it, starting the battle. If you know what you're doing, you can sometimes walk around skipping that battle. And the only way you can actually grind in this game, like Chrono Trigger, is to exit the area completely and repopulate the area. But you never really need to, because Chained Echoes works off of a very similar concept thought up by the legendary dream team of Harunobu Saraguchi, Yuji Horii, and of course, the legendary Akira Toriyama, where you'll never be underleveled. While Square's dream team did it through some of the best game design of any RPG ever made, Matthias Linda used a way simpler system, leveling up the teams through boss fights and completing side quests. It's inspired by the idea, but easier for one guy to implement and manage. Also, the very first moment of the game was clearly a reference to the very first moment of Chrono Trigger, with Chrono and his mother. How about Glenn? Glenn is another Chrono Trigger reference. Glenn is Frog's human name. But that's not the only game it takes its story and gameplay elements from. What about Suikoden 2? Sharing similar elements with the protagonist and his best friend Joey's story and relationship through that game. Gameplay wise, you're going to travel the land looking for more members to add to your crew, even going back to your base where you'll build it up depending on their skills, just like the Suikoden franchise. And of course, the legendary manga Berserk. I mean, Kalen has a very direct Griffiths moment, let alone some of the imagery. And the camaraderie with your friends of the Iron Bull kind of reminds me of the Band of the Hawk. And that's not including making deals. The man who made this clearly loved all these properties, and I'm all for it. It feels like this game was directly made for me. And let's not forget, he is clearly a fan of One Piece. Tell me this doesn't make you think about the Marineford arc. I mean, even this happens. But let's sprinkle a little Berserk on this scene. But for those of you that are skeptical, how about this unique monster's name? Goldie Waterfly? That's clearly a reference to the Will of D. While this is probably my favorite game of the year, and I love almost everything about it, there are little things that hold it back from being an all-time classic. Like a few members of the cast not even being usable up until the last dungeon, basically. The fact that you can easily manipulate the combat once you understand the buff and debuff system. Winning battles fairly easily. But there's also so many ways to express your playstyle throughout the game. Even if some of them break it, I literally can't stop singing this game's praises. Seriously, if you're an old school JRPG fan, this is a must-play title. And I believe it's up there with some of the greatest indie games. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And also, tell me what references I've missed and your favorite parts of the game.